Okay, here we go. Panelists, if you want to introduce yourself in order.
Sure. I am Peyton Avery, and I'm a former fourth grade teacher, and I've been a STEAM resource specialist for the last 2 years in Fairfax, Virginia.
Hi, everyone. My name is Andrew McDonald. I'm based out of Gatineau, Quebec in Canada. And I'm a former physics, chemistry, and math teacher, and I've been supporting teachers and students to integrate technology into the classroom.
I'm Vicki Sedgwick. I'm a K-6 computer science teacher in the Los Angeles area. I'm also one of the K-8 representatives on the Computer Science Teachers Association board. And if you're on Twitter, I'm one of the chat moderators for CSK8, which happens twice a month.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Captura. I'm a STEAM resource teacher for Fairfax County Public Schools. I get to work with all the great teachers like Lisa and Peyton all across Fairfax County in Northern Virginia.
Hi, I'm Lisa Rode. I'm a sixth grade teacher at Canes Glen Elementary in Springfield, Virginia, also in Fairfax County. And like Victoria said, I'm a CS for All Teachers Community Ambassador. So we're going to start out tonight, and the format will be we'll be posing questions and the panelists will talk about them, but we're inviting you guys, everyone else, to join in as well. We'd love to hear your ideas, your thoughts, your questions as we go through. So just starting out with what is the microbit, and why is it a tool that you go to? So if I'm not sure is anyone familiar with the microbit anyone joining us? Little computer. What I love about it is it has a ton of sensors, and the new version they've added on, so you don't need to like hack headphones, or there's also a touch capacitive sensor on it. Would anyone else like to share anything about the microbit that you like to utilize?
Lisa, one of the great things about the microbit is it's actually a microcomputer and not a microcontroller. If you're familiar with Makey, that's actually a microcontroller and needs to be attached to the computer. But the microbit can function on its own, so you can attach a battery to it and take it out into the field.
And that's something that I really enjoy about them too, is that they're small, they're lightweight, they're inexpensive, tons of sensors built on it, and you can take them and go. Very, very durable. And that's great with the students. So I'm not worried about them breaking them. We've broken very few of them, and definitely they were being abused a little bit.
Yeah, it's one of those things that you just need it. You don't need any extra peripherals to enjoy it, and you don't need to necessarily have the computer attached to it. You program it with the computer or other device, tablet, that sort of thing. But then, as Chris mentioned, you can take it and go out into the field for some data collection if you wanted to, or explore. And you can use it for reading right on it, collecting data, those sort of things. So you don't need that extra stuff like with an Arduino, for example.
Yeah, and it's nice because kids are learning coding on the computer, but it's a physical manifestation. That it's a thing that they can actually get to do something rather than just coding on the screen. And also for me as a new STEAM teacher, I had to really think on a budget. And so for me, as opposed to buying these expensive robotics kits, it was a really nice option so kids can actually feel like they're coding some sort of computer robot without having to spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars.
Right. I agree on the cost for sure. And one of the other things that I love about it is it's another one of those low floor, high ceiling kind of things, because you can program it in many different languages, starting in a block-based language for those kids that are familiar with Scratch and things like that, and switch to JavaScript, and to Python. So it definitely can grow. It can be used in a really wide range of grade levels.
That's one of the things I really love about it too, is the versatility and how you can grow with it. And then you can expand upon it. There's lots of little robots you can add on, or other, like hats you can add, so that it's not just the microbit anymore, depending on what you're doing with it, or the level of your students.
I think the last time I checked, there was like over 180 accessories or something ridiculous. There's so many out there. And so you got to, with that many options, you got to sort of pick a few of them or get a range of them, and then you can have the students explore. And as mentioned before, it's, you can get a class set of these microbits for the same cost as maybe 1 or 2 other robotic kits. And so you can have that one-to-one to explore and get started with people, with your students, and then they can start to, make projects and getting into groups and do some other exploratory and building upon on their learning.
Absolutely. And that leads us into really nicely, how have you used microbits, and how have they been a useful tool for CS integration into other content areas?
I can jump in.
Sure.
Yeah, so I've used it in the math classroom and the science classroom for as I mentioned before, data collection is a fun thing. And Chris mentioned in the chat too, you can pair it with Bluetooth, or you can to a phone and collect data, or you can also connect the microbit and it can be pushing data live onto your computer, and then you can look at that and understand some data analysis coming out of that. So that's fun to explore in the science classroom, and then also in the math classroom, if you wanted to use it with various functions. Here in Ontario, where I usually support teachers, coding just got integrated, and so there's this explosion of like, how do I code type of questions. And so like it's looking at, not just coding, but like how can we, hit 2 birds with 1 stone and sort of thing. Like, let's code in the English classroom, or let's code in the math classroom. So we can see how we can do that. So, for example, a fun alternative to a rock, paper, scissors was, instead of, if it's a rock, paper, or scissors, let's give ourselves like a person, a place, and a thing, and it's like a great story prompt, that sort of idea of looking at that.
Andrew mentioned that rock, paper, scissors activity, which is one of the core activities that's in MakeCode. They have some really great tutorials in MakeCode. So if you're just starting out, that's one of those great activities. It'll walk you through step by step on how to implement that. So it's really well supported by the tutorials that are embedded into MakeCode. I worked with a 2nd grade teacher about a year and a half ago, before pre-pandemic. And she was wanted to use that basic idea to implement some math strategies in her classroom. So we took the random number generating program and used that to generate numbers between 1 and 10, and then numbers between 11 and 20. So when you shake the microbit, it'll generate, you can program it to generate a random number. So the kids had their microbits programmed to, when they shake it, it would give them a random number, and then they would meet up with another student, and they'd each record their random numbers, and then they had to add them together. Well, then the teacher had the great idea that not only would she have them do the random numbers, but she'd also have a 3rd student program in whether it should be add or subtract, right? So now the 3 kids get together, one shakes, gets the first number, one gets the second number, and the 3rd shakes it to get the add or subtract, and then all 3 of them write it out. They took that same basic idea and they applied it to third grade in Virginia, where they start to learn multiplication and division. So instead of the plus sign or a minus sign, they implemented a multiplication or division. But it was all really just using the basic MakeCode program and just adapting it to generate whatever numbers they set the parameters for. And I have video to prove it.
I like how there's just different iterations. You start out with something basic and then you can modify and modify and modify onto it, and having those easier access points. Chris, I think that you've done this as well with the soil moisture sensors. We've got some seeds that I flew on the International Space Station, and we grew tomatoes and did a blind study last year, and again this year. And then the students, as a monitoring system, we had a Raspberry Pi that was taking pictures every so often to make sure things looked okay, and we had data. But then we created a soil moisture sensor using the microbit in addition. And so it was just a nice way to kind of integrate a whole bunch of concepts together and use what we already had. We didn't need to go out and get anything fancy. And we were able to modify, starting out with what the documentation that was on MakeCode and microbit had provided, and then just kind of integrate a couple different areas.
And I think that's the cool thing that, like Lisa, I know that Lisa and Peyton and a lot of the other STEAM teachers that are using the microbits across Fairfax County, they're not using it as the end product. The microbit isn't the end, it's a means to an end. They're integrating the curriculum, math curriculum, science curriculum, you know, things like soil moisture content, but they're using the microbit as a tool to kind of teach or to support the curriculum, the core curriculum learning that's going on in the schools.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Peyton.
Oh, I was going to say, on that same token, as well as integrating, I do also use them to just teach computer science concepts as well. So for instance, in 5th grade, we were big on learning conditionals and those if then else statements. And so after doing some unplugged activities, I thought it was a really nice transition. So because I think they can understand, it's hard to switch from the concept of if then else to, you know, coding it. But I think doing it with the microbit, and we use a tutorial as well, I think that kind of helped them make the transition to how this would apply to a computer program, I guess, if that makes sense. So I do use it directly. And you're teaching them logic as well, which is really nice. But I did like that transition that you could go from an unplugged and then show them, okay, now here's what it's going to look like when you're coding. And it's in the form of a game. They coded the rock, paper, scissors, or there's like a coin flip that they can do that simple as well. So I really like that, how it was already on the website, super easy to use. And, you know, the kids aren't generating a lot, but I think it's helping to nail down the concept and what it looks like when you're using actual coding language.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I typically use it mostly just in CS classes because that's what I teach. Our science teacher, however, has done the soil moisture thing. So because they see them as an easy entry, but we typically use them. We've been using them with our more with like 5th, 6th grade students. And so we have a series of lessons, and I just put a link into the chat, that we go through where they learn the basics. And talking like about the rock, paper, scissors, we extend that then into, well, how would you make that into like a fortune telling thing, like a, you know, like an 8-ball, magic 8-ball thing? Well, now you have a whole bunch more choices. Do you really want to hard code all those? So then we start teaching arrays in that. So you can start adding on the more complex computer science topics. It's an easy entry into those things, and they learn how to start working with those in grades that you may not be doing too much with arrays and things, but the microbit lends itself to that because, hey, I want a magic 8-ball or a fortune teller. I'm not going to want to say, well, if it's this and then what if I want to add, 10 more options? Well, harder to do that if you have to hard code it. So anyway, those are the basic lessons we start with, is what I put into chat.
And it also lends itself nicely to building on that and becoming a more efficient coder. That's one of the topics in our grade 6 curriculum, the new math. So coding, as I mentioned, is in the math curriculum, and it's because, you know, that's where they put it, sort of thing. It could have been a standalone, but anyway, which is another topic for another night. But yeah, so it's in the math curriculum, and it builds off of each other. So grade 1 is sequential coding, grade 2 is like sequential and concurrent, and then grade 3 is sequential, concurrent, and looping, I think. Oh, hopefully we're not recording this, are we? No, I know we are. Anyway, I don't have it right in front of me, sorry. But anyway, I know that up in the grade 6, it's about talking about being a more efficient coder, and so understanding, you know, that you could use an array as opposed to hard coding a bunch of different things. And the other thing that I really like about the new curriculum is there's sort of the point 1 is all about being able to write your own code, and then the point 2 is about debugging or understanding what other people have coded. And I think that's one thing that we often talk about, like, let's code this from the beginning. But it's also fun to, like, you know, let's code a rock, paper, scissors and then decompose it for something else. And so I had done that with when I was doing a classroom, and they were getting ready to go on their I can't remember, to gym class, but they didn't really have gym. They had to do something. The teacher had to do it themselves, you know, COVID, et cetera, et cetera. So I was like, well, let's code something DPA related, the daily physical activity. So let's say that let's like, give me 3 examples of things you might do. So you have like plank or push-ups, sit-ups. I'm like, perfect. Okay, so let's code those as their 3 options. And then let's put another randomizing. So let's integrate the random number, and then you're going to do that many sets or that many, you know, plank for 30 seconds or and so we said like between 10 to 30 seconds. And so it had a little icon of it because we didn't want to have to read planking. So we put a little icon or a little push up. So it was like beep, 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 beep. It was super funny because you see the creative nature of the kids. Like, what does a sit up look like when you've only got 25 LEDs? And so you get creative in there. So it's definitely fun.
I definitely think that balance, depending on, you know, your curriculum and where you're able to support it. And that's one of the biggest things is, you know, these standards are being pushed, and yet we don't all have the supports to do it well. And making sure that teachers have that understanding of, you know, of the programming side of it and the hardware side of it, and it's not just kind of thrown in just to check a box. For sure. And we've kind of started talking about this already, and I know, Vicki, you were showing what you used to get started. So what strategies do you use to introduce the students to the microbit? Like, how do you get up and running before we get to these bigger projects? And then, you know, because there are some logistical things with the microbit.
I can start off. I was doing it in was doing some one-offs here and there, but then I also did teach a course on the engineering design process, and so that was probably my biggest jump into it with these students. So half the course was microbit, and then half was using CoSpaces and VR, but that's another story. So we were getting in there, so a lot of introductory things to them because some of them had coding experience, because these are like grade 8, grade 9, grade 10 students that were getting into this class. And so some had some experience with coding, some had, you know, what's coding type of thing. And so you got to sort of try to differentiate for them, making sure that the people that are here and the people are here, they don't feel, you know, left out, that sort of thing. And so I had a series of videos that I created, and one of my colleagues had created on some introductory things. So we had taken 1 or 2 tutorials from the website, but we also took a few very introductory things and we tried to cover as much as we could in terms of like sound, arrays, functions, all the different types of sensors. So light sensor, magnetic sensor, what sensor, temperature sensor, and everything on the board. So we didn't even, we made a series of 15 or 20 that were just on the board. And then because we were doing this virtual, we didn't really have access to external stuff where, if we were in person, we would explore this anyway. So yeah, we had created these, and so that it was a little bit self-paced as well for the students to explore at their leisure and go through that. And then they, we had a chance to create some little projects and that sort of thing. So my idea was like, here's a couple of videos, and then can you make me a video or make me a project, and then trying to highlight one of these things, or whatever. So that was sort of the idea on introducing it to the students.
Yeah, so I usually do it after we've talked a little bit about coding. And then I just plopped in the chat. There's just a really quick 1-minute intro, which I think kind of nicely kind of just shows the kids what the microbit can do, what are the different possibilities. And honestly, because a lot of my students are so new to coding, we run through some of the tutorials the first week and I just let them play. And like Andrew said, it's really nice because the makecode.org website, it can you can do it in Blockly or JavaScript or Python. And so I normally have only a few kids that have gone to like a summer camp or something, and usually they're a little bit cocky that they already know how to code. And so I tell them, okay, if you already know how to use Blockly, like see if you can, make the connection with JavaScript, and I show them how they can do it. And even if they don't know the right commands, like you can do it in Blockly and see how it translates and see if you can write the next line in JavaScript or Python, whichever one they pick. So I think that's really nice, and it's a little bit self-differentiating. But yeah, the first week I just kind of let them play and just kind of get used to the microbit and how they work. And that seems to be a hit. The kids really enjoy it. And again, it's really cool because they're seeing the physical manifestation of what they're coding in this cool little computer screen. So.
And that's something that's also really nice about the microbit, is that, if you don't have enough of the actual devices, being able to use the emulator on MakeCode makes it so that every student is able to interact with it and also just see what's going to happen. You kind of have like a test run. And that was really also nice when we were virtual, to be able to have that and get started and get everyone that experience before we were able to move into other activities.
I was just going to add that because I get to go around Fairfax County and work with a lot of different teachers, I tend to be in and out of classrooms pretty quickly. So a lot of times we actually start with unplugged activities. Before we ever get to the microbit, we start with some type of an unplugged activity, especially with the younger students, first grade, second grade, third grade, to help them understand, what algorithmic thinking and like a sequence before we ever get to start programming. One of the things that we like to do is the program me as a robot, using arrows or something like that. So that the students get to program me and tell me how to move across the floor. And if they do it wrong, I get to run into a wall or something like that. But it really gets them to start thinking algorithmically. And then it makes the transition to the program, block-based programming, a little bit easier.
Yeah, definitely like building off of the unplugged lessons and not just jumping into hardware, just, because I think that making sure that the students have that foundation is so important. And, if you're introducing it at a higher grade level, sometimes you kind of feel the need to jump into something because you want the kids getting excited. Making sure they have the foundations, they understand what they're doing is super important. Is there anyone else who would like to share anything about getting started and how you kind of ramp up?
I think the big thing to remember is there's so much help on the microbit site, that your kids are going to figure things out that you may not even know, and that's okay, right? Like Peyton said, she lets them try things, and it's perfectly safe, especially if you're just using the emulator. They're not going to hurt anything, and they really can't hurt the microbits anyway. The only thing we've ever had problems with, like Lisa was talking about, really is the battery holder. Just that's the thing that they've done. I've had to get new battery packs, but other than that, we haven't really had any problems. And I have one friend who had to resolder on one of the buttons, but they're not going to hurt them, and they can experiment with them. And, we just can't be afraid to let them do that, let them take off, because they're going to find things you didn't even know.
Yeah, and along with that, usually when they're doing the tutorials, I say just run through it first and follow most of the directions. But as soon as you're done, see what happens if you code the screen differently, or, see what happens if you try a different variable number. And yeah, I do encourage them to play. I say, just get the base and then go crazy and have fun and see what it does. And I think eventually, I usually the first week I'd give them like 3 tutorials to choose from. And then I say, if they finish all 3, then they could just explore the blocks. And of course they find the ones that give you sound. And then all I hear, and then my new rule is like, put on headphones. If you're going to do sound, put on headphones, because though every computer making the same beeping noise is not super pleasant. But it's so funny how they find that one. But yeah, no, for me, it's important that they do actually learn sort of, rather than just goofing. But I do think, like Vicky said, there is a learning in the goofing, as long as they have a little bit of a basis to kind of just play around and see that scratch cat. Oh my gosh. But yeah, it is. And yeah, and I've been amazed too at what they have learned to do. I had a kid that just figured out on his own how to get it to play a certain song because they were working in music on a certain recorder song. And I guess they knew really well how to read music, and he was able to get it to play the right tune, just note by note, which was super cool. So they do come up with some great stuff.
Yeah. Well, I think it goes back to that, as we're all here, we're all encouraging young people to get into educational technology. Goes back to Seymour Papert and learning to code or coding to learn. And so I think we need to give them that little getting started so that they learn to code, but then afterwards they're just coding to learn. Like, how do I do this? Well, I don't know. Figure it out. How would you think that you would do it? And so what I have done with my students sometimes is like, well, write down in plain English what you want it to do. And then, if you don't know how to do something because it's like super difficult and you haven't seen that in any of the tutorials that I've created for you so far, or you can't find anything on the website, well, ask me and then we'll walk through some things together. And so I've had that opportunity where I, have a student screen share, and we sort of walked through some stuff with them. And actually, at first, she had to send me her code so I could look at what her code was doing, because she started to get like super complex at what they were doing. And so she had done the Flappy Bird tutorial, but she wanted to code one of those extension pieces onto it. I'm like, well, I haven't done this yet. So I had to do it myself so I could know how, so we wouldn't spend 2 hours wasting our time. We ended up spending like an hour on it, but it's because I didn't want to be like, okay, go get this, click it here. Yep. Okay, great. Thanks. You're done. I wanted her to I kept asking her, so what are we trying to do? Like, where is this part? Because when you're dealing with like big functions and multiple places, it's like, so where does, when the obstacle touches the bird, where is that? She's like, well, I don't remember. I'm like, well, we just did it like 10 minutes ago and it was like over there. Anyway, so it was, you start to get like in there. So anyway, so what I usually got my students to do is when they would submit a project, it's not just like, here's my project. It's like, I want you to try to comment your stuff, do some pseudocode. And if you wanted to go to the next level, record a screencast of your project and like, how does it work? Because when you just give it to me, it's a whole bunch of code. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. Do I press A? Do I press B? Like, because I was dealing with some students that were getting into like maybe state machines and stuff like that. Like you got to press A to then go into the next level, or you select A or B to go to something. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing, because so I needed them to do that. And so yeah, so they were using Screencastify as the one that I had sort of familiarized myself with. And I didn't want to be like, if you know any other screencasting things, go for it. But I wasn't going to be like, well, here's how you do this, here's how you do this, here's how you do this, here's how you would then embed it into the website. I gave them 2 options. So they ended up building this learning artifact of a website. And I'll drop in a link of my demo site that I would share with them. And then off of that, I think I linked a few of my students' websites. I asked them if I could share it, and they were okay with it. I just got to figure out how to copy paste on a Mac here. There it is. Okay. So yeah, you can have a look at that. And, you know, if there's any questions or anything, please feel free to reach out, and, you know, that sort of stuff. But yeah. Yeah, sorry, I'm talking a lot.
No, not at all. It's great. And definitely like that when you try to pare down what a student's looking for, because I think they get so excited about something and they want to include everything, and you're like, okay, babies, like we've got to work our way up to that. And that it's really hard because they get so excited and then they get defeated. You're like, no, we'll get there, but we just need to go step by step. Otherwise, we're going to get so lost in that process.
It's one of those great examples of where you can integrate the science curriculum. We have a lot of where we deal with scientific method and the idea of having one variable. And so when the students, they want to keep throwing more and more things into their project, they have so many variables that when it doesn't work, they don't understand where the problem is. So if you start to get them to think in scientific method by changing one variable at a time, and then actually creating the subprograms within MakeCode, you know, so I can have a block that does this and a set that does this. And so that way they can test out the parts, and they can see if their one variable is functioning the way that they want it, and then run the whole program.
So knowing that this year has been like no other, and that we're not quite sure what the future is going to look like, what are some ways that the transition to virtual or hybrid has impacted lessons, and have you modified them, thinking about like things that we might do for the future, things that maybe you learned that have worked out well because of it, or things you're hoping go away pretty soon so that you can do something differently next year?
Well, what we ended up doing last year, we were in the middle actually of our final project, which is a group project, which meant that's not happening because we're now virtual. So we did some extra things with working with functions and arrays in just in the simulator with them. And then this year we actually went one-to-one, and we sent home a kit that had the basic microbit, and it had a few, you know, it had like an external LED. We had microbit 1, so it had, you know, a little speaker they could connect. It had, you know, a few things that they could use, and some alligator clips, so that they could go through the basics and then try and, you know, create something with that. We ended up coming back to school kind of partially through that. And so then they were able to do some things online, because one of the things we do with the rock, paper, scissors is we actually have a rock, paper, scissors tournament, which once they've created the rock, paper, scissors, you know, and if you lose, you join the team of the other, and everybody cheers for everybody. And, you know, so it's kind of fun to play that. So they were able to actually do that, which was very fun. But we had to take out the group aspect when we went virtual, because it wasn't, you know, we just couldn't do that. And even when we came back, we were still six feet distancing at the time. They were working with microbits. Very hard to work on a group project together where you can't share materials and you have to be 6 feet apart. So everything they had to do was individual. which there's good and bad to that.
We made a lot of use of the emulator in MakeCode. And even though, so that allowed every student to at least have a virtual version of the microbit that they could use. But the other thing that we found really interesting was that even though the students didn't have a physical microbit, they still wanted to share their ideas with others. So we were able to like put them into breakout rooms, and they could put their screen up and show the other students what they were doing, and then actually get feedback from the other students about what they had just programmed. So I think a lot of times they were more willing to listen to other students' ideas than they were to listen to my ideas or the ideas of the classroom teacher.
One thing that we used, or that I used when supporting teachers and students to get started, that sort of was to use the microbit classroom. I don't know if anybody's mentioned it yet, but it's it allows for you as the teacher to sort of launch a virtual classroom. So this can be done in person, hybrid, remote, etc., like any combination that you can think of, and you as the teacher can sort of launch it, and there's given a unique code that the students then join, and then you as the teacher can sort of code something and they can follow along. And but if they're struggling or they're not following, or they're not, you're not sure where they are, you can then go and see their code live, and so that's very helpful. So it really depends, like there's sort of pros and cons to that. If you've got a student that's like, exploring off on their own, it might be better just to use the MakeCode platform versus using the classroom environment. So it's, like, are you going to be asynchronous or synchronous, virtual, hybrid, remote, in person, etc., all these sorts of ideas. So we were asynchronous, so I used it only once, just a sort of introduction, like, what is coding, what's the microbit, let's code something together. And then after that, it was like, here are the lessons, go at your own pace, I'm here. I would check in with them every so often, but yeah, it's sort of the mix of the two, I think was pretty good.
Yeah, I was actually pulling that up right before you talked about it, is being able to see the students work live and being able to share that more easily. When we were fully virtual, they could share their screen, and that was a little bit easier. But then we were in person, especially with the 6-foot distancing, it's like, I can't see your screen, what's going on, how, and then being able to share with one another was way easier. Awesome, thank you so much.
And Lisa, I see that Mark shared a link in the chat. Mark, do you want to talk about what you just shared?
Yeah, I made a Wakelet. So every time I go to the sessions, I just jot down the websites you guys are sharing. So to make it easier for everyone. So I just made the Wakelet right now.
Oh, thank you.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's just great to be able to compile resources that you can then dig through later, because sometimes you get a lot of things and you're not sure where you're going to use them, but maybe you want to use them in the future. And I think we'll kind of end on this question here of kind of hopes and dreams for next school year. What would you like to do with the microbit? What are you hoping to get into? Yeah.
I'll start. So I think I've mentioned that at my school, a lot of kids are just learning how to code and are kind of getting used to it. So it's been my goal over the past couple of years just to build capacity. And currently it's more over things like Scratch and code.org because of the virtual environment. But it's my hope that eventually kids will have enough of a foundation that we can do more of those makerspace open-ended projects where it's really about them problem solving. And like Andrew was talking about, to get to that end goal and know enough about code that they can, pick from their brain and pick from their library of possibilities to know what to do to create that. And actually reminded me, so my younger brother is a coder, and he told me it's so much more important to be a good problem solver than it is to know all these languages. And that's what employers actually look for, is that, you know, they put you through all these rigorous tests when you're applying for jobs, and it's all about, can you problem solve? Because, you know, coding languages are always changing. So it's not really about learning, you know, the syntax. It's about learning, how do I get from A to B? And I recently learned there's coding styles, which I didn't even realize, is that apparently certain coders have a certain way of normally doing it, and people can kind of ID them by their style. And I just found that interesting, because I think we think of it as so like A to B, this is how we do it. But yeah, there is a less efficient way, a more efficient way. And sometimes it's just a preferred way when you get into more of the advanced coding anyways. But yeah, I would love for kids to get to the place where, for instance, I was, you know, doing the random number generator for one of my lessons and asking them, you know, how could we work this into a game? Could we make it a board game? Could we change the numbers? Could we do war with, like, basically, how could we apply this to a wider game? And then you can bring it, if you're a, you know, STEAM teacher like me, kids could then go to the STEAM lab and pull out poster board and tokens and figure out how to create a game with the microbit involved. And then they would have to know how to code it properly, but they would really get to pull in that creative piece as well, and not see code as just like, okay, I have to do this. I got to check all the boxes, make sure everything's right. And really see coding is a very creative thing as well. It's not just this, you know, science, computers. It's not always within the lines. So anyways, those are my big dreams and goals for one day.
That definitely made me think about one of the projects that I would love to get into next year. Next year, I'm going to be a resource teacher, which is going to be a whole new animal for me. I'm not used to being out of the classroom, and just thinking about possibilities and being able to pull in other students. And we have a really creative SAC teacher who can build almost anything out of cardboard. And she recently built a pinball machine, and she's like, we need to wire it up. And I was like, microbit's going to be the way to do this. And so really working with a group of students, potentially pulling in young scholars is who I'm really thinking about, in saying, okay, so, you know, do we want score? Do we want to get extra points somehow? Do we want lights? And so having it of like, how can we make this something for, you know, for us to use and to enjoy, and then learning the coding behind it. Yeah, absolutely. And I thought that, yeah, that's going to be worked out really well. Thanks for the idea, Chris. But just having that kind of as a, like, we want to make this work. And if it doesn't, I feel like that's another way to empower them to debug and keep working, because it's play. So that's one of the bigger hopes and dreams, but I'm pretty pumped about the possibilities with, one, my new position, and then two, you know, kind of just connecting different classrooms and different teachers in the building. Chris, I saw you shared some things in the chat.
Yeah, Andrew and I were thinking along the same lines. What I'm hoping to do next year is to help teachers make connections to real world problems. And that's where the UN Sustainable Development Goals come in. The UN has these 17 Sustainable Development Goals for the entire globe to be working on. And Microbit has already created a bunch of core basic projects that correspond with those 17 Sustainable Development Goals. I'm not sure if they have a project for everyone, but there are some like Clean the Oceans and things like that, where they definitely have projects that are already created. And those could be good cores for you to start with and then modify to whatever your needs are, or even to say, how can we address this at a community level? So maybe instead of thinking about world and how to improve, excuse me, how to fix the world, let's just worry about how to improve our community. So that's kind of my hope for this coming year.
And that was those individual learning, they got to do whatever they wanted to, but then when we came together for that group project, well, it was a pair project because we were virtual, and I know that the individual would have been better, but I wanted a little bit bigger of a project, and I thought doing at least pairs, it would encourage them, because we sort of walk through the engineering design process, or the, you know, some of you might know it as the design thinking process, the innovation process. Anyway, it's sort of like, and we've mentioned it before, but maybe not by name, but like that, debugging or getting things there, debugging, iterating, prototyping, and testing it out, keep iterating and testing, that sort of thing. And so I wanted my students to do that. And so I designed or encouraged them to use those sustainable development goals. And the Do Your Bit challenge is the one that they've done. And so this year it's going until not January. It was launched in January. It's going until July. I can't remember the exact day, but yeah, so they're focusing on goal number 3, which is climate change, and 13, no, I got that mixed up. 3 is good health and wellness, and 13 is climate change. Last year it was 14 and 15, which was life on land, life in water. So I feel like they're going to keep hitting some of those other goals. But and so my first assignment that we had done was just like, what are these 17 goals? And so like nothing to do with coding. It was just like, let's do some research and make something. And then I wanted them to sort of be thinking about that for their assignment, for that bigger project. And now I didn't force them, or I didn't say like, you got to do 3 and 13. I said, pick anything you want, but let it be known that if you wanted to submit your project idea to this global challenge, which I would love to guide you more, and we can mentor, we can connect later. It would be great to do that. And so yeah, I'm excited to see all these other things, but again, like integrating in into other places like Kane's Arcade. Let's get in there with cardboard, and then like, hey, I've got a microbit, let's throw a microbit in there. Like, so I did that with my son. We created this little I had a few of these cardboard discs that I'd used for a microbit trendle wheel. I decided to use it for a microbit little, I would drop it down a little chute and see drop a little Lego wheel down a chute to see if it would land into, so like a carnival game. And so like I was chatting with a friend of mine. If you can think it, you can code it type of thing. And so and love to be in those maker spaces like Payne was talking about. Like, let's get in the maker space and start making. Like, love to do those sort of things. So for sure.
I love all the ideas, and I'd love to get our students more involved in the Do Your Bit challenge. It just hasn't worked out timing wise for us when we do it, but we keep thinking maybe we should shift it a little so we can be more involved in that. We are next year planning on our older students build an automata out of cardboard, and we are going to we're going to have them build it just to be manual, and then we're going to work on trying to automate it with a microbit next year as the next step. So that'll be kind of fun. We're hoping it's worked. We've never tried it, so we'll see how it works out.
So in our closing few minutes, I wanted to pose to the attendees, if you had any questions of any of the panelists here, anything that you heard that you wanted to follow up on. Chris, I saw you posted in the chat earlier that you're new to microbits and appreciate the resources. And I would just encourage you, you've got like the dream team here, if you want to pose a question to them or anyone else. Mark, you've got your hand raised. Go ahead. If you'd like to unmute or do it in the chat, that's fine.
Yeah, hi, I have a quick question. I might use it in the summer. Do you guys recommend anything like maybe CodeHS or something that's free that uses microbits for the students in order for me to track their progress?
In terms of tracking their progress or getting started?
Yeah, I get not tracking progress, but just getting them started, because I know if I use it in the summer, we're going to be doing, unfortunately, a lot of doing a lot of reading and all this stuff because of the school year that they lost a lot of academic. But, like I might have some kids that, I can get started, and then while I'm doing something else, I know Make Code is one, but I don't know if there's anything else that you guys didn't mention before. I guess that's my real question. Is there anything else that that we can use?
I know on the Make Code website, so Make Code is like a Microsoft initiative, whereas Microbit has got their own foundational website. So the Microbit projects page that I think someone posted, I think Lisa had posted that a while ago. That's got some great projects, like step-by-step type of things to create. And then also on the Make Code, there's the tutorials. And then the other thing that the Make Code website